Thank you for joining me today on the History of the Papacy podcast. As usual, I'm Steve, your host. We have a great episode for you today featuring Nick Barksdale of our YouTube partners channel, The Study of Antiquity in the Middle Ages. Nick has turned many of our episodes into a multimedia experience by adding great videos, pictures, and graphics to the audio that I produced. Nick really does an expert job at producing these videos, and I'm really appreciative. The Study of Antiquity in the Middle Ages not only features episodes from the History of the Papacy, it also features episodes from some of your other favorite podcasts like the History of Ancient Greece by Ryan Stitt, the China History podcast by Lazlo Montgomery, the History of Vikings podcast, lectures from university professors, and much more. In this episode, you'll get to know Nick a bit more as Nick and I talk about a wide range of topics, including one of my favorites and his historical movies. I really think you'll enjoy this conversation, and I look forward to your feedback. If you want to learn more about the Study of Antiquity in the Middle Ages, you can find it by searching on YouTube for the Study of Antiquity in the Middle Ages. When you're there, make sure you hit the subscribe button and then ring the bell so that you get updates every time a new episode is released. I'd like to take just a moment today to thank listener Sarah for recommending to me and buying me the book Traces of the Trinity by Andrew Robinson. I really look forward to reading this one. Also, keep sending in your questions and comments for our questions and comments episode. You can send them to my email address, steve@a2zhistorypage.com. Submit a comment to the website, a2zhistorypage.com, or on Facebook and Twitter, which you can get by searching for A2Z History Page or the History of the Papacy. Now on to our discussion with Nick, and I hope you enjoy. All right, welcome to a very special episode of the History of the Papacy and the Study of Antiquity and the Middle Ages YouTube channel. I'm Steve Guerra, and I host the History of the Papacy, and I'm here with Nick Barksdale, who is the producer and editor and content producer of the Study of Antiquity and the Middle Ages. We wanted to do this little episode just for everybody to get to know each other. If you follow the History of the Papacy, you've definitely seen Nick do many of an episode of the History of the Papacy on his channel. And if you're a viewer of the Study of Antiquity and History, you've probably heard an episode or two of the History of the Papacy. Nick, how are you doing?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm great. It's nice to see you. We've talked on the phone and things, but
Yeah.
I've never actually seen you.
Yeah, well, that's more to your benefit than anything else. But now that benefit's gone. So
Maybe to start off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in history and podcasting and YouTubing?
yeah, absolutely. So I've been obsessed with history ever since I was a kid. Ancient. It started off actually. My brothers would actually read to me out of true crime books, so completely different aspect of history. And then it slowly just went from there. I was kind of obsessed with the Civil War when I was a kid. I feel like that's typical. And then I kind of moved on to ancient and medieval history to the point that when I was 16, I finally got to go to Ireland, Scotland, and England, which had been almost like a dream of mine. So I got to go to a bunch of the old battlefields, castles, stuff like that. But I mean, I've always loved it. I live in Oklahoma. I am currently 28 years old and family man. Got a wife and one little daughter who's making me pay for everything that I've ever done to my parents. So it happens. But no, that's pretty much it. I've always liked it. I've always loved reading about it, and eventually I got to a point to where I just want to make videos about it, and eventually start a podcast. But I still keep procrastinating on that aspect. So,
I mean, you got the channel. That's halfway there. The video, it's such a different thing. This is my first time video calling somebody on an interview, so it's a lot different. I can't be so fidgety and ADD as I normally am. I started my podcast about 6 years ago. I'm a little bit older than you. I feel really old too, but when I talk to somebody who's 28 and who's done so much, who has a huge YouTube channel, I really got into podcasting. I love talking about history and I love reading. And I was like, well, what's a great way to combine those two things and then get to talk to other people who love these sort of things? And I started a podcast. I always thought about doing videos, but I didn't know where to start. And then when you messaged me one day, I was like, this is such a great opportunity and I've just got to give it a try. And it's worked out really, really well. I think the production of the video along with the audio it just works out spectacularly.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. It's a lot. It's a lot of fun. And I mean, honestly, I love working with many of the podcasters like yourself. I mean, History of the Papacy podcast, the History of Ancient Greece podcast, the History of the World podcast. I mean, you guys provide phenomenal content, and I'm just happy that I get to spice it up a little bit with stuff you can, I mean, see, and I mean, so on and so forth.
Oh, don't forget the China History
Yeah,
podcast too. Laszlo,
not
he's a
forget
great
Lazlo.
guy.
He'll let me know about it. So
I've met Laszlo and I've met Ryan Stitt of the
interesting.
History of Greece, but I've never had a chance to meet the guy who does the History of the World podcast. He seems like a really interesting guy.
Yeah, I would love to sit down and have a conversation with him. His podcast is pretty phenomenal. From what he's told me, I mean, he's going to be doing this from years from, I mean, starting with the Neolithic period like he did, going all the way up to modern day.
Yeah,
That guy has got a travel planned out for himself, that's for sure. Yeah.
it just really is. I've done very little like public speaking. I'm a teacher, but I just like in this feels like I'm in front of people right now because I know
I know,
it's
dude.
going to be in front
Well,
of
I mean, here in a
people.
little bit, you're going to be in front of 30,000 of them at this point. So,
Maybe this is a good time for us to talk a little history, I think.
yeah.
What's a part of history that you're really fascinated with, maybe right now?
So, I mean, as far as what I'm fascinated with, and this is actually what's very interesting. If YouTube wasn't so strict, I would have another channel up already. But my best topic will always be the history of the Third Reich. My grandpa and his brothers all fought against the fascists in World War II, and that was always a fascination of mine. I mean, not only studying it, but collecting relics from World War II, so on and so forth. So, I mean, I have a love for antiquity in the Middle Ages, but truthfully, truth be told, my best subject is always going to be that era. Um, as far as my interest right now, dealing with ancient and medieval history, I'm really obsessed with kingship right now and the role of a king in his society. That's something that's very interesting to me, and especially dealing with like totalitarian monarchs during ancient and medieval history. And the fact that, I mean, to be king is one thing, but kingship is a completely different aspect. You know, kingship is basically the ability to rule well. And that's been what I've really been diving into lately. I'm having to slowly make my way through about 25 different books dealing with the subject. So that's taking me a little bit. And with the kid and the family, I can only read on the weekends. So I'm like barely trucking through that.
I've heard, I heard somebody say, I can't remember who said it, but kingship is either the best form of government or the worst. There's no in between ground. And I think that that's pretty much true.
I would say, yeah, that, and honestly, it's probably the most honest form of government too. I mean, what you see is what you get, quite literally. So,
I think kingship is interesting and it's a good form of government in that if the king really has skin in the game, so to speak, that if they're in the front line of the battle, they're not just, moving pieces around the board that like would eventually happen with the absolute monarchs, like in the modern
uh,
period. Like they kind of lost if they went and sent 100,000 people out into battle and 50,000 died, they really didn't care that much.
no, that's very true. That is very true. And I mean, you can see that there's actually a really old miniseries I always recommend to people, and it's called Fall of Eagles. And it actually deals just with that. It's shot similar to I, Claudius back in the day, like a stage setting, but it's awesome. And you actually see like how, like Nicholas Caesar, how he's so out of touch with the actual battlefields and stuff like that, that I mean, his blunders actually eventually lead to his eventual destruction. And it really just goes through, and you see their arrogance, but also their complete detachment to what's actually reality versus the men on the ground who's actually the ones getting slaughtered. But it's actually, if you haven't seen it, it is an excellent TV show.
Oh, that does sound like a good one. Another thing I've been researching recently for another podcast kind of thing I'm doing is the Civil War. And it's amazing how nobody learned any lessons from the Civil War. They basically, after the Civil War was done, they all went back to the same tactics. The basically like in World War One,
Yeah.
they did what they had made all the mistakes that they had already made in the Civil War, and then the Americans still came in and did the same mistakes.
No, that's absolutely true. And I mean, just like the fact that they still tried to use cavalry in the First
Hmm.
World War, it's just absolutely insane.
By the middle of the Civil War, the smart cavalry commanders weren't doing cavalry charges.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's true. That's
it's
true. I
it's
feel like it had
insane.
boiled almost to more like reconnaissance than anything else.
Yeah, or rapid transport, that the horses were just transportation to go from one place to the other because that was the best thing that they had at the time.
Yeah.
And by World War One, they even had better ways to get people around the battlefield. Yet they still did, charges of infantry and lined infantry. It was when they should have known better. I
Oh yeah.
think that's one of the things I'd like to learn more about.
No, that's actually very true. I actually have my great grandfather was actually in World War One, and funny story about that one. He was running from one trench to another, and a an artillery shell hit near him, and it knocked him off his feet. And he was laying there in the mud, and he said he could just feel his stomach hanging out. And so he's laying there screaming and screaming, and then after minutes go by, he realizes that he's not actually in pain. And he looks down and he's just caked with mud. He said
Oh,
what made him
jeez.
mad the most is the fact that no one bothered to pull him back into the trench. But his friends were just standing there. They thought it was hilarious that this guy actually thought he just got ripped apart. But I mean, that's a whole sidetrack story right there. But
I think that's the other part that for this one episode, my mind's on that track because I've been doing so much research on it. Is we get so focused on the generals and the kings and the leaders, and we forget about, the regular guy. To do another little sidetrack story, my grandfather fought in World War II, and he tried to get out of it. Like you don't hear too many stories of people who try to get out of getting drafted into World War II, and he finally got drafted, and he fought in many of the big battles in the Pacific, and he was so insubordinate, he he got sent home, and like you don't hear those stories that and I mean he was really messed up afterwards because like half of his friends got killed,
yeah,
and he didn't want to be there. He had no interest. He was 18-year-old guy and was screwed up the rest of his life, and he died when he was in his 40s. Like that's you don't hear much of those stories. It's all, oh, this and that commander did this and that and the other thing.
yeah, you can tell. I mean, if you look at Patton and him not realizing, like what shell shock was. He thought all of those guys were cowards, but in fact, I mean, these dudes were traumatized
Yeah.
because of artillery shell, because of what they had seen, and it's guys like that, they had no clue. I mean, they probably didn't even know really if you what PTSD was, or the fact that, I mean, really PTSD has always existed as long as there's been conflict.
You know what? The other thing that's struck me was like if you go back to maybe World War One, how much pain the normal person was through. Like a lot of those Civil War commanders, they were about my age, like early 40s, and they already had onset of heart disease. They had arthritis. They were dealing with, long-term diseases.
Yeah.
Now you pop a couple of Advil, um, heart disease, like I don't have any of that stuff. I'm probably feeling at 41 what most of those guys felt like at 21,
Right.
you know, for
Seriously.
what they went through. Like that impacts your mindset and when you do your day-to-day activities.
No, I can only imagine. I mean, if you take like Grant in the Civil War, I mean, by the time, I mean, this guy used to get intense migraines on top of being a severe alcoholic. And so it's like, I mean, I can only imagine, like, I mean, there were some people he would just lay in his tent. And I mean, you can only imagine the crying and the nightmares and stuff like that because every decision he made while impaired, I mean, you're going to lose no telling how many soldiers
Yeah.
because of that. And it's not a responsibility I want on my conscience.
No, the drinking was really probably one of the few like analgesic things that they
Yeah.
had to, to take the edge off. And
I
then with
mean,
obviously that there's a lot of side effects of that.
yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, that amazes me. Or like Robert E. Lee, he had serious heart disease onsets, like where he was getting shortness of breath and probably having like soreness in his arms and things like that. And I think he was in his early 50s at that point, early to mid 50s, maybe, where now that's like people's prime of their lives. They that's not, that was he was basically at a death sentence at that point. There was only a certain amount of time before he was done for, where now, you have a heart disease, you're on medicine, you're getting, checkups and that sort of thing. You can live for a long time if you're on top of it. Like he didn't have that choice.
Yeah, no, man. I mean, think about it. You lose a finger in the Civil War, and there's a pretty good chance that you're gonna die. So, oh man, I read like it was a graph that talked about like how many soldiers died from this amputation, or so on and so forth, and the number of people that died due to either a finger or a toe that got cut off. I mean, it's absolutely horrifying, and it's like the worst place, the last place you would want to be is on a surgeon's table, man. Like. Ugh.
Yeah, and that's relatively recently. Like think about go back to the, where my podcast is and where a lot of your YouTube videos focus, where you're in antiquity, and it's even worse. I
Oh
mean, it's
yeah,
almost
absolutely.
infinitely
Oh
worse.
God, I can't even imagine. I mean, one little bit of rust from either an arrowhead or I mean, you name it. I mean, even then, like if an arrowhead hits your shirt and you don't catch a piece of the cloth, I mean, that's actually what killed his name. I believe it was Reinhard Heydrich, who was a Nazi commander in World War II, and that's actually what killed him. The resistance in Prague tried to assassinate him with a car bomb, and it blows up. And I mean, they successfully remove all the alien materials that weren't supposed to be in there, the shrapnel and stuff like that, but they left one little piece of cloth which was from his car seat, and that's what got infected and that's what killed him. And so it's amazing how little stuff like that can have such a life threatening effect. And it's, I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, it just happens like that. And even in World War II, I think they didn't have as advanced antibiotics as we do today, but they had something at
Yeah,
least.
exactly.
What's something from antiquity that's been interesting to you lately?
Hmm. I haven't got to read it yet, and I can't wait. I just ordered it. It's a book dealing with the almost like the prestigious families in the Roman aristocracy of the Republic, and so you'll actually learn about like the family Julius Caesar came from, for example, and why these families get along, why some of them don't, why some of them are more prestigious than others. That one is actually one I'm really looking forward to. But right now, I'm really trying to get into the actual administration of the Roman government itself. I'm starting off, of course, in the Republic, and I've actually got quite a bit stocked up that I need to go through by big ones like Theodore Mommsen, I mean, so on and so forth. But actually, I'm really happy that one of them, it's the Roman Republic by Heitland. It's actually in 3 volumes, and I cannot wait to go through this because, I mean, it really goes in depth on not just a ton of political reform that led to the establishment of the Roman Republic, but I mean, all the different offices. I mean, what the tribunes do. I mean, I found out I would have made a great tribune. Like, as a tribune, your only job is to use your veto to troll people that you don't like on the Senate floor. And then you can also veto another tribune's veto. And so, I mean, it's stuff like that. I mean, like, you like trolling people on social media. Nah, this is way better. I mean, you get to actually troll the Roman Senate with your little veto. But I mean, it's stuff like that that I really enjoy, but I'm trying to really focus on an administration aspect of not just the Roman Empire, but also of the Middle Ages as well.
I've just picked up this book called The Year 500, and it's about the Celts who,
Hmm.
after the Anglo-Saxons had come into Britain, a ton of the Celtic aristocracy went and left, and they went to Brittany and then northern Spain. And I had heard about that, but I didn't know there was a whole book about it. And I can't wait to start reading that book.
That is interesting. I'm really surprised I haven't heard about that one, man. I own so many books on Celtic history. That is actually one of my favorite subjects in ancient history is Celtic history. I think actually the second book I had purchased for me by my parents when I was a kid was actually a book on Celtic history, and I think it was written by Kevin Duffy. I'm pretty sure. It's pretty fascinating. Come to find out, the older I got, that book turned out to be more pseudoscience than fact. But
Well,
hey, it was still a present. I still love it. But no, I love Celtic history, and actually, Brittany, if I remember correctly, Celtic language is still technically spoken in Brittany,
yeah,
which
I've heard of that. That's cool. And I mean, that's a long holdout, especially when they
is
pushed like French so hard in like the 1800s, that the room for people to speak just vernacular languages and their local languages really died out in a good chunk of Europe.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially Wales and Ireland and Scotland, especially in places like Wales, to where it was almost like similar to what the certain missionaries did here in the U.S. with Native Americans. They really try to force I mean, not just for you to lose touch with your culture and I mean your clan colors and stuff like that, but also, I mean, if you got caught speaking Welsh in school, like you could get beat for it and then sent home, where you would probably also get beat by your parents as well.
We're
So
getting sent home. Yeah.
pretty much.
That's really interesting in Europe. Like after Rome fell, and it was probably during when there really was the Roman Empire was around, is that each village from Romania to Britain to Spain, every village you moved over spoke a little bit different version of Latin, little bit, until you went and you got into what was a different language. Like a friend of mine, his parents are from Italy, and they're just a couple of villages apart, and they really couldn't speak the same home language to each other. They would have to speak like the usual, like the Italian, like the national Italian, because it was that divided that just a couple of villages over, you weren't even going to be able to pretty much understand what they were saying.
Wow, I can't
And
even.
that was the continuum all the way across the former Roman Empire.
God, it's crazy. It's like, I mean, if you look at the way certain people speak I mean, different ways to speak English. Here in Oklahoma, I mean, we have, oh my gosh, it is a completely different form of English compared to if I go up to New York or New Jersey. Everybody's got their own, I guess you could put slang, but I mean, when I went actually to the UK, we got stopped by some police in Ireland, and we were finally just going to ask him for directions. A carload of dudes driving around just over and over and over. It just never looks great, especially over there. And so, but they asked us, they're like, "Hey, do you mind popping your boot for us?" And me and my brothers looked at them like they were insane. And my other brother's like, "Dude, we're not wearing boots. We're wearing tennis shoes." And he's like, "No." He's like, "Are y'all Americans?" And we're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Your trunk." He's like, "What's in your trunk?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely."
And you're actually wearing sneakers.
Yeah, right. And plus, just for the record, I said y'all. The police over there would never have said y'all. Okay.
No, y'all.
If they did, I'd be worried.
I'd like to learn a little bit more about how you got into video and video recording and putting together these I mean they're really like documentaries in the Ken Burns style where there's a lot of pictures and panning and videos inside of the pictures. That's a really interesting part of it because I don't that was one of the big things for me to not get involved in YouTube is that I just had no idea where to start with any of that.
So some of my first videos will never see the light of day, and that's because I used to put together these little political videos, right? And that's actually how I got my start. I had this really cheap video editor, and I would just put together these little propaganda films for me and my buddies. None of them will ever be seen by anybody. ever. I mean, if I ever go into office, I'll probably make sure those computers are completely destroyed just to protect myself. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, but now I slowly just started messing around, and some of my first, and you can actually tell, some of my earliest uploads, it's nothing but an audio with an incredibly long static image, which a lot of people do. Actually, quite a few history podcasts will usually use a static image on YouTube. But I wasn't happy with that, and I wanted something that could completely immerse you. So if you're hearing about a scandal or an assassination or, I mean, a conflict, I want the people to be able to see it, not just hear about it, but to see it, to actually not just listen to history, but to be able to see it take place in front of you. And I'm a huge fan of Ken Burns. His documentaries are absolutely amazing. And I mean, honestly, the fact that some people have complimented my YouTube channel in the past as that it has a Ken Burns style, honestly, that's one of the biggest compliments I can ever get. I mean, his work is absolutely amazing. I will say, on average, it can take anywhere from 24 hours of work
Wow.
putting together doing the visuals for some of those episodes. I think the one it's ethnicity, no, race and ethnicity in the ancient Mediterranean. That took me about 9 hours, I think. And that was me trying to, I mean, you have to search for the footage. If you can't find stock footage, then you got to go with photos, and then you got to make sure everything flows right. And it can actually be quite a bit of work.
Yeah, I was talking to someone, I don't remember who it was, but we were talking about that just to edit the audio, it's about an hour and a half for maybe 30 minutes of recorded or you of unedited audio is about an hour and a half to 2 hours of editing, where video it's probably about double that. It's so much more. And especially if you start editing where you're talking and you have to make sure you get right back in the same position that you were in, and or if you don't want to have that huge jump, it's a lot.
No, that's true. That is absolutely true. I think that's one thing I do want to work on more. I actually want to be on camera more. I think that's one of my biggest things is I'm not used to being on camera. I mean, even in most of my actual presentations where it's me and not another podcast or something like that, usually you'll hear my voice, but you'll very rarely see me on camera. FYI, for all you people on YouTube watching this, I'm incredibly nervous because I think we both are. We don't ever do
Yeah.
stuff like this. So if you're seeing me on my channel, it's a rare occurrence. So treasure it or despise it as much as possible because it doesn't happen as much.
I think I am going to try and record for videos for your channel. I'll try and record the video along with so you have a little something more to work with. But I've learned so much about video with the green screen you see. Well, maybe you'll see behind me. I'm not sure how it'll work the way we're recording it today. But it's really interesting. It's a lot of fun too. I think that's the big thing about um, getting into podcasting for me is that it was, you know, the creative process and learning all this technology. There's so many resources out there. I mean, you can learn basically anything on YouTube.
Yeah.
There is not much you can't learn by just, you basic. I mean, I fix my car, things that would have probably
Yeah.
cost like hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of plumbing by watching YouTube videos, and I'm pretty sure the one that I specifically watched was not correct because I'm still having troubles getting that thing to run right. So that is actually something I've been getting pestered about for about a week to finally finish fixing that. So
Gotta
eventually,
go
I
back
decided
onto
and
YouTube.
just do it. But I'm not watching that other video. I will go to a different one. I've learned the hard way. Make sure it has the most views. So.
That is something on like YouTube and podcasts, even like in our history. It's not the end of the world if we get something wrong, but how do you sort through? And you're in the younger generation, like there is a big generation gap, I think, between this all this stuff's native to you. You were, bred on YouTube. And how did you learn how to sort through what's real and what's fake especially in things like more academic things on YouTube, like history and science?
So this is actually a really funny thing about me, and I've actually shocked some people because they're used to me sharing so many YouTube videos online. But I very rarely watch YouTube. And that is 100% true. I mean, every once in a while, if we're eating pizza and stuff like that, and I've got family over, we'll watch Vines or dank meme compilations, which is a great way to waste your time, especially on the weekend. But no, it's true. I very rarely use YouTube, and I typically don't hardly use it. And every once in a while, I will share like an academic lecture to prove my point that this is what certain people are actually saying. But for the most part, there are 9 times out of 10, if I'm debating a historical subject with somebody and they share a YouTube video, it's insane. Like absolutely cray cray. And I mean 100%. As soon as I see it, I'm like, oh, here we go. And then I will post a list of, I mean, book references, I mean, mainstream websites that go to universities, but they don't care. It's YouTube, only YouTube. And I think that's one thing that's always baffled me. Honestly, when it comes to history, I typically get it out of these books. And even then, you'll believe it or not, I'll actually check the publisher of the book before I buy it. If they'll sell it in a metaphysical section and it comes off as a history book, I'm like, nah, that's how you get ancient alien stuff. And I mean, that's always a great way to ruin history conversation. Who built the pyramids, right? It had to be ancient aliens.
Yeah. It's funny too, like you do get like a spidey sense of what's good history and what's bad history. And most of the stuff you do find on YouTube is pretty bad
Yeah,
history.
that is true. I think one thing I will do occasionally is I'll go to certain history channels. I mean, like History Time, which if none of you are, I'm sure most of you are, but if a lot of you are not familiar with History Time, I actually started around the same time he did, and man, his stuff is phenomenal. It's no shock that this guy has literally hundreds of thousands of subscribers because his videos are absolutely perfect. And he's only getting better. As a matter of fact, I actually go there occasionally just to try to watch and see how he does it because he does it so well. I mean, it's if you're a YouTuber, no matter what you do, it would be great for you to take notes from this guy. But I mean, that's occasionally I'll use YouTube to do a little research, try and see how some people are doing their history better videos. That way I can make my channel better too. Not copy their content. I'm not about that. I just want to figure out how to make my channel better for everybody else.
Yeah, the other thing I've noticed on YouTube is the comments section.
People are
I That's off the wall. Like I
and I don't
never
even believe in evil, but I'll say it. I those some of those people are evil, man. So mean.
It's so funny where that comes from. And it's like they'll take a tiny sliver of the video and blow that up into something. And then somebody will take a tiny sliver of that comment and blow it up into something else. There was another podcaster, I think it's Daryl Cooper of he hosts a podcast called Martyr Made, but he said how YouTube comments start off. Somebody shows a picture of a video of Taylor Swift petting her puppy, and then by the third comment, everybody's called everybody Nazis and like they're gonna
Yeah.
kill each other. Like
Oh yeah.
that's
I've been, oh my God. I either it's really this is what I've got. On one side, I get called a Nazi or a white supremacist all the time, which is really funny to me because if you actually watch my channel, I don't know how you could think I'm a white supremacist. Like some of the stuff I post is either so progressive historically speaking or almost like revisionist history. And then on the other hand, I get called a cultural Marxist. So it's like, I just can't win, apparently. Apparently I'm both. I'm a communist and a Nazi, so go figure.
yeah, and I wonder if that's just the new thing. Like that doesn't seem like that it's that old where things have gone so south with people in comments sections and just in, I guess across social media where it just gets so nasty so quickly.
Oh yeah, and I mean that's one thing that I've always thought was amusing is you take a group of people online, let them talk about economics, politics, history, I mean social issues, and I mean people will eat each other alive. And I mean just horrific. But you take those same people and throw them in public and the chances of them actually saying any of the stuff they've said online is I mean slim to none, because
Yeah.
people they're so cowardly in real life. But I mean, I've had actually great conversations in places like Starbucks. I mean, with people from the far left to the people who are literally the alt right. And we've
Hmm.
had some of the most pleasant conversations you can imagine. I mean, my friends range from one side of the spectrum to the other. and somehow we can all still sit down and play Risk on a Saturday. So, and all walk out alive. Just want
Yeah.
that. So,
Depending on how the Risk game goes.
yeah, I know. It usually turns pretty nasty after about hour three. Yeah.
I used to have in high school, college, we would have Risk games that would go pretty much like 6 hour stints for like 3 days.
Yeah, I was gonna say my longest game was 3 days. We would go to work, come back, take pictures, make sure nobody was cheating, and go back. I mean, it was insane. I'll never do that again as long as I live. But we make it pretty real though, man. As soon as someone pulls out a phone or they go out to smoke and someone else nonchalantly gets up to go to the restroom or something, you know there is Game of Thrones style politics taking place and you just don't know it yet. And I'm notorious. You send me a text, and I mean, I will do this. You'll ask anybody I play with. I will wait. And when the moment is right, I will literally show the wrong person that text message and be like, hey, he's about to attack Central America. Yeah, that's right. You just thought West Africa was your friend. So no, we have a lot of fun though. Risk is actually one of my favorite. I mean, I love that game. I can play it with anybody all day. That and chess.
What are some of the things that people are liking on your YouTube channel? I've done so far for your channel, I've did an episode on Vandal Africa and Christianity in Africa, and that was a pretty popular one, I thought. There was a
Yeah.
lot of engagement on it. And that was one of my, I think it was one of my favorite episodes. I think that's a difference between YouTube and just podcasting. Like with so much of podcasting, it's just shooting it out in the dark. And it's me in my little room in the basement talking, and it's not a lot of feedback, and you see the downloads. But in the YouTube, when you see it, you're getting the
Yeah.
views and you're getting the comments, you're getting some feedback on there. What are some of the big topics that you found that are more popular than others?
Definitely going to deal with religion, race, or social issues. 9 times out of 10. I mean, you take I mean, I've got over 1,000 comments on it right now, but if you took the race and ethnicity in the ancient Mediterranean, man, the I'm trying to think anything involving like Indo-European languages. I mean, anything like that can be a controversial nature, but especially religion. And I mean, you're gonna bring out everyone from the sane to the not so sane. But the funny thing is, when it comes to a YouTube video, content is obviously important, but what really gets it out there is the tags.
Yeah.
And that is, and I mean, I'll try and figure out, I'll usually type in a keyword and see what comes up, and I always try to go with the one on the top. But if I'm uploading what's going to come with a trigger warning episode, whether it's race in ancient Egypt or let's say the Spartans were super gay. I mean, really. And it's just, I make sure to use all the right tags. And I mean, I'm totally trolling because I know I'm bringing out everybody, but that's also the whole point. I need views, I want comments, so on and so forth. So I kind of, all those crazies you see in a lot of the comments, I mean, I brought them there. So I really can't complain. And my ads still run while they argue. So I really can't.
Yeah. That's one thing that I've noticed about YouTube, and I'm starting to do it more on my podcast, is I would do titles that were made sense in if you were listening to my podcast from beginning to end. But if you were just looking at them individually, like, looking at one that I recorded 4 years ago, I don't even really remember what that episode was. And the title doesn't give me a big hint. Using titles that are just like right to the point is super important.
No, that is very, very true. I think I accidentally, I don't know how I did it, but I somehow mislabeled the title to where it was very misleading. And about 1,000 people told me so. They said, one guy was like, I've sat here for 45 minutes and I have yet to hear this person talk about what I came here for. And at that point, I was like, yeah, my bad. You're totally not going to hear that. I was like, I'm so sorry. But I'm allowed to make mistakes occasionally. So, but yeah, title, I mean, tags, and also the words you put in the video description, from what I've read, also help as well. So a lot of times, like the History of the World podcast, he'll have a very short episode description. He likes to keep it short, simple, to the point. I love that. But what I'll do is I'll put kind of my little spin on it. And since I've listened to the episode, I try to go in depth on it and just put more words in the actual thread just to kind of help gain views.
Yeah, I've done that. And like I would do titles like in the series of just like name the series. Like I had one about the Council of Nicaea that turned from what was going to be one episode into like 10 episodes. And I just said Council of Nicaea part one, part two. And within there, there was a lot of like controversial stuff and interesting things that probably should have been labeled better and titled better. Um, I think for a lot of the episodes that I do that work well on your channel are my sidetrack episodes
Yeah.
that are not exactly in the timeline of the papacy, but little things that are offshoots. And my main goal is to try and make those fit together more. But I do a lot of things that are like history in the Bible type things that are they don't fit in with the main. But the way I see it, you're kind of getting two podcasts in one for the
Yeah.
price of one.
No, that's very true, and that's one thing I think is interesting. There is a he's a biblical scholar in his own way. His name is Bruce Gore. I really like this guy. He's got a great personality. The few times I've corresponded with him via email about using his episodes on my channel, he's always been super polite, super, I mean, humble, just a very nice person in general. But I'll actually his was a historical context in the Old Testament. So his whole video series is about discussing the Old Testament and events that happened and basically explaining other things going on in the regions at that time. So, like the Hittite incursions into the Levant, how that eventually leads to, in the Old Testament, the Israelites fighting the Hittites and stuff like that. But I mean, it's really fun. But you'd be surprised the comments I get on those threads,
Oh,
man.
I
It's
can't even
like, I
imagine.
can't believe you're teaching this as fact. Oh my God, this channel's falling faster than the Roman Empire. And it's, stuff like that. But it's like, guys, that's one thing I love about my channel is the fact I'm going to give you history, and it's not just going to be from one perspective. You're going to get an evangelical perspective on history. You're going to get a leftist perspective on history. Sure, you know what? You will get some cultural Marxism aspects on history while also getting conservative approaches to history as well. And that's my point. I want to know that everybody feels like they can come to my channel and get history that they want. In many cases, I feel like there's so many channels out there that they only pander to one audience, nobody else. That's not my goal. My goal is history is for everybody. And really, everyone can look at history, and sure, they're more than welcome to get their own interpretations. And I just want to make sure I'm there to provide that interpretation.
I think that's what's the cool thing about the Bible, especially the Old Testament, is that there is a lot of history in there. It might not be history written like your textbook, but you have to dig down and burrow into it and look at some other sources and the archaeology and how it all lines up. But there's a lot of history, and it's interesting history because it's the perspective of one group of people on the history that written in a certain way. Like I just recorded an episode about the book of Daniel, and Daniel's supposed to take place about 200 years before it was actually written.
Yeah.
So you're getting the perspective on 200-year-old history from somebody writing in the time of the Seleucid Empire, who's fighting a very different battle, but they're using that history, 300-year-old history, to paint their current history. That's real stuff right there. It might not be on 236 BCE, there was this battle and this happened and this happened. To me, I find that a lot more fascinating than just cut and dry. The historiography, and I'm not a historian. I didn't go to school for history. I learned a little bit along the way in college and, on my own. But to me, that's the really interesting stuff. And that's where you can learn a lot, is how people actually felt was happening in their times.
No, I completely agree with that. And I think that's one thing that I've always said. I'm always very open about the fact that I am an atheist, and people are always shocked. Like, I'll have some people accuse me for being an evangelical because I've got Bruce Gore's video on my thing. And I'm like, look, guys, I'm actually an atheist, but I also love studying biblical history. If you roll out the Bible or the Torah or even the Quran, you're missing some very vital aspects of history. And I'm sorry, you leave those books out, you're not fully going to understand what you're studying. They're both important. And, I mean, as an atheist, I personally look at a lot of the more what I would call mythological events in the Bible, but I also apply that to Roman and Greek history too. I mean, if we took, what we read from the Greeks at face value, then I mean, we're looking at demigods and stuff like that, but for me, it's about sifting through certain things to find the historical aspects of certain things. Kind of like Bart Ehrman's always talking about the actual history in the Bible and how he's trying to figure out, what's the difference between what's myth and what's not, what's fiction,
Hmm.
what's not. One thing about the ancients, they love to spice up their history with a little bit of myth, a little bit of, nationalism is not the right word, but, the right side of their history per se.
Yeah. I mean, look at Julius Caesar. Was he really writing in like the Gallic Wars and all those? Was it he writing a straight history, a news article? No, it was he was
Yeah,
sending reports home to make him look good.
pretty much.
And so you can't take that as, as the gospel, so to speak. You have
No,
to parse these things out, and I think that's what's interesting. I've gotten into arguments about people about what's objective history. I don't think there is much objective history. There's a lot of things that it matters what people think about what happened.
No, that's very true, and you'd be surprised how many people they read, like let's say Suetonius or Tacitus, and I mean a variety of other historians, and they literally take what they say at complete face value. And I mean they'll represent that in an argument or a debate. And I can't tell you how many times that I've seen other academics that I know online ask these people, like, "Hey, have you read these people's writings on that and their actual interpretations of what they're actually talking about?" And you'd be surprised, like, no, why would I have to do that? These are academics, they're not primary sources. But it's like, guys, it's like everything we know about the primary sources comes from academics. And it's about, I mean, literally, these historians are the political commentators of their time. So you take the people of our day who are writing history books with a little bit of a political agenda, you're getting the exact same thing, but more in ancient and medieval history. Especially when there's a new emperor in town, everybody wants to be on that guy's good side. And so they're writing these negative accounts. I mean, even like Nero or Caligula, we're not necessarily Nero, but Caligula, for example, we're starting to see in a slightly different light compared to how we viewed him in the past. We thought this guy was literally just an idiot, but there's some things about this guy's personality that was not really insane. He was incredibly smart. And, we believe that he suffered from a mental illness that he never got over. But the fact that like he wanted to make his horse a consul, people thought he was literally that unstable. But the fact is, he's really saying this horse would be more useful in the Roman Senate than you guys.
Yeah.
Stuff like that I've always found to be very, very interesting.
Or well, who was that guy who was writing the secret histories during Justinian? Was that
That was
Procopius?
yes.
He I mean, he was writing the histories for the mass consumption, and then his secret history, but his secret history was all catty gossip,
Yeah.
that he loved talking stuff. We'll keep it at stuff for
Yeah.
this.
Stuff.
That's you can't take even what he was writing secretly in his journals at complete face value. That's one of the things with biblical criticism, like the where they say that if something's the criterion of embarrassment, they call it, where if something's embarrassing and it makes it into the Bible, that must be true. All these rules, they just made them up, but that doesn't mean they were necessarily true.
No, that's very you have a very, very good point there.
There's a lot of things that historians that kind of artifices, and that's why history isn't in the physics department. Physics, you can talk about constants and things that are laws and facts, and this 2 + 2 = 4. The speed of light is whatever it is.
Yeah.
To say what somebody wrote in a document 3,000 years ago, that's tough to say whether it's interpretation or fact.
No, that's very, very, very true. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it could be fact, it could be flat out lies. I mean, it truly just depends. And the funny thing is, we'll probably never fully know. And so I think that's one thing that people get so bent out of shape over what they call revisionist history. You know, in many cases, it's just a different interpretation of certain events or certain people. And I mean, the truth is, I mean, there are some events in history we know for certain did occur. We know what created those events. But when it boils down to it, there's a lot of it we will, especially the farther back you go, we're never truthfully going to be able to say this is 100% true. Well, unless it's like Carthage getting destroyed. That we
Yeah.
definitely do know.
Or like Edward Gibbon, a lot of the fallen or rise and fall of the Roman Empire is taken as uh, absolute truth. But that was really revisionism of the time. He was a atheist kind of Protestant
Yeah.
who was going to Rome, which was at a kind of a low point, and then he's seeing how things look so, messed up and that it was so glorious at one time and kind of skips over the 1,000 years of history, right? That like
Yeah.
Rome itself had risen and fallen several times, even in that time period between when he said it fell and where he was sitting there in the 1700s.
No, that's very, very true. Gibbon, I love Gibbon to death. He gives you a completely biased, totally 100% upper class perspective on history, but he is a classic. The fact that he actually uses Christianity as like an aspect to the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, it's funny, but it's also for his time, that's also pretty ballsy at the same way because he's about to upset an incredibly large number of people, and he's still in Europe, so there's a good chance this could have came back to haunt him in a way that it really didn't, but it could have been so much worse for this guy.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to see how much things have changed. That there's so many things that we take into account now as far as like climate change contributing to the Bronze Age collapse. A lot of the violent migrations throughout human history was because certain areas got hotter, certain areas got colder. I always say, not confusing it with global warming. I'm just specifically talking about climate change. But if some of y'all want to study that and like the effects of climate change on ancient history, there's a couple of really good ones out there. One of them being 1177 BC by
Oh,
Eric
yeah, that's a
Stein.
great book.
That dude is awesome. One, I don't know if y'all have ever had the chance to correspond with him. That guy is really funny. And I mean, he's also funny and comical in his book too, like when he's talking about the Hittites and the longest drive-by in human history. And so stuff like that is really funny, but his perspectives on, I mean, until I read his book, I'd never really thought about climate change in the ancient world. I just never really thought about it. But now there's so many different books that deal with that you're like, wow, I mean, I never would have even thought about it if I hadn't read it.
Yeah, in my podcast, I'm a lot of the things I'm talking about are in the 7th century. Europe went through a cold, wet period from about I think it may have started around the 500s and went into about the 800s. And if you look at the Dark Ages, a lot of people hate the Dark Age, the using that title Dark Ages, but I don't understand. I mean, if you look at it, it's pretty dark. People didn't do a lot of writing, they didn't do a lot of travel. It corresponds really well with that crappy climactic period.
No, I completely agree. And I feel like in many cases, I mean, there's some people that get so bent out of shape when they hear someone use the term or type out the term Dark Ages. And I personally don't have an issue with it. I mean, look, sure, not all parts of Europe was a complete insane psychopathic bloodbath, but there was quite a few people they couldn't read or write. There was chaos in some areas, and then in other places there was very centralized areas of power. And I think to say that Europe did experience a dark age, it may have varied geographically. But I mean, there were some pretty horrific times in early, what they would define as the early Middle Ages. And so that's why there's some people who I think it's more of a socio-political perspective why they don't like the term Dark Ages in
Hmm.
describing early medieval history. But No, I mean there was a lot of great things that happened, but I mean when you're thinking about it, you still got all these barbarian factions that are still at war with each other. There's an educational decline, excluding the church, obviously, but I mean a lot of the kings can't read and write at this point. A lot of their staff can't, and so it's I mean you see an uneducation aspect to medieval Europe, and I mean a very honestly a very feuding and bloodbath aspect to early medieval European history as well. I've got a I don't see it here, and I completely forgot the title. But it's a blood feud in the early Middle Ages, and they were literally gang wars that went on for, I mean, sometimes 5 or 6 generations. And I mean, it's absolutely insane to think about. But I mean, there were entire families wiped off the face of medieval Europe because one guy stole a pig from
Yeah.
another dude. I mean, and they're still killing each other for it at this point in history, and it's absolutely insane.
Those people were so much more connected to their whole societies were so much more connected to agriculture. Even the most advanced societies like the Aztecs, who had an advanced agriculture, and the Romans too, none of them were many more than a bad harvest or two away from a pretty big societal problems. And maybe if they were a decade of bad harvests, that's when collapse came.
Oh yeah, I mean, you lived or died as a society. I mean, there was no way around it. Whenever the Black Plague was first really introduced to Europe, and this is when they believe it was killing off well over half of the European population, there were reports that, I mean, you could walk for towns and not see anybody because every single person was dead. And I mean, that's amazing. And I mean, they said after, a certain period of time, all these villages look like jungles, overgrown. The houses were falling apart. And I mean, they said there were sometimes, I forget his name, but he was a person who wrote about the Black Plague in Italy. And at this point, his family members were all dead, his friends were all dead, and he could walk down entire streets of a city and not come into contact with anyone at all. And I mean, I mean, talk about a ghost town. I mean, that's freaky. I can't imagine it.
Yeah, agriculture and disease that just boom, game
Yeah.
changers within such short amount of times. Like I live in an area that's, you don't go too far away from the city and there's a lot of agriculture, but I have no clue if they have a bad harvest. It might cost, a few cents more for tomatoes in the supermarket, if even if they have like a devastating harvest, because they can get more tomatoes from California and it winds up costing a little bit more. Where there, like if you're within a couple of miles of you, there was a devastating uh, crop that year, you were toast.
No, that's
Your
true.
kids were dying. Like
Yeah,
that's
this isn't like, I mean, in most situations, you lose your job and you're like, well, I mean, I'll go and get a job at Walmart at least. At least I'll have some form of paycheck. No, I mean, back then you were lucky to be able to get a second occupation. And I mean, and even when feudalism sets in many cases, you can't, depending on your social status, you can't leave said land to begin with. And so it's like if you happen to be unlucky and you get a really just bad lord with no really good decision making whatsoever, this incompetent idiot up top could literally stagnate and decline your entire life. You're born in poverty, you're going to die in poverty, and depending on how stupid this guy is, your death may be a lot sooner rather than later. And it's, I mean, I can't, I mean, just thinking about the fact that if I would have been in that population, which realistically and statistically, I probably would have been. I would have been lucky to have at least made it to be a soldier, but even then, realistically, we probably, I hate to break it to all the people who think they're related to kings and queens, but we would have all been really good at digging ditches. That's all I'm saying. And so, the fact that I wouldn't be able to leave my land, that I would literally have to depend 100% on people who are above me. I mean, I mean, especially for Americans and I mean, people living in first world countries, that's a terrifying and aspect that we'll never truly know what that's like.
it's probably like really like people about our age are it's really your great grandparents who were the last ones like with the Spanish flu who
Yeah.
had maybe a brother or a couple of family members who died. I think my great grandmother had a brother and a sister who died during that.
Yep.
But it's really, I mean, that's a long time ago. You're talking like 100+ years ago, whereas the last time in like the developed world where people had to really worry about a lot of people dying at one time in your family.
No, that's very true. And the fact that you're seeing in places like California, where we're literally seeing a medieval disease come back to life,
Oh
that's an
man.
absolutely, I can make jokes about that all day long, but the sake of my viewers, I'm not going to. But it's incredibly shocking and funny and also terrifying at the same time. I'm like, man, I mean, can you imagine if something like that came back and we did not have something for it, something to combat it? I mean, that would be, especially as cram packed as we are now. I mean, I live outside of Oklahoma City in a town called Newcastle. By city standards, this is country, even though it is, I can be in the city in less than 10 minutes. But it's still so packed out here. A real disease that we couldn't combat would wipe out my area in probably a matter. I mean, it'd be insane. Especially you take a place like New York City, Oklahoma City, San Francisco, LA. I mean, there's a reason why in zombie movies the people don't last long. I mean, you would see how fast a disease would spread in a place like that. And ugh.
Oh yeah, you even see like if the lights go out for a couple hours, it's kumbaya for maybe the first day, and then things start getting a little looser after
Oh
that.
yeah, I mean, you see like whenever a natural disaster happens, man, people, it's like a flipping the switch on my light, man. Everyone's in a really nice civilized society, and then the next thing you know, people are looting Walmart. I mean, really. Or the funny thing is, they're not even looting Walmart. Nah, dude, they're like throwing a chair through a shoe store window, and it's like stuff they don't need. Like Americans, we're so typical. We're not even robbing the places that have food. We're just going after, I want a new TV, or when the power comes on, I will have my flat screen. You know, so sad.
It's so funny. My little tiny taste of that and that little like sense that like maybe my ancestors had was a couple of summers ago, the water went out, a
Oh,
main burst, and like basically our whole town was out of water. And that night, Wegmans is the big like grocery chain here, was like World War III for people buying bottled water. And I think the police may have shut it down. And I'm not going to say I'm a prepper, but I buy like, if I go to BJ's, I buy a couple of cases of bottled water.
oh yeah.
And I was outside with my neighbor and he was saying, well, I went and bought a bunch of extra water. And I'm like, well, should I say that I have extra water just in
Never,
case?
never, ever, man. See, this is the best part about me and my family. We have a really long history of being like a free for all. And so, nah, dude, something ever. I mean, I don't, nah. If I've got a ton of water or canned food in my house, you can guarantee it. Unless you share my last name, there ain't nobody gonna know about it. And even then, only certain people with my last name is gonna know about that food because I know how my family members are. No.
Yeah, you get that sense like things like the water turning off that fast and people who have the wherewithal to think like I started boiling up water and
Oh yeah.
filled the bathtub and that sort of thing. But other people, it's like, go to Walmart or go to the grocery store and start fighting for it.
Oh, dude, yeah. I mean, oh my gosh. I used to go to Black Friday at Walmart just to watch moms fight each other. I should have videoed it. There would have been a great YouTube channel for that in the making. People of Walmart UFC. But I mean, oh my gosh. I had an older lady. She had to be in her late 60s, early 70s. She rammed me with a cart. I wasn't even standing in line. She just thought I was, and it was for an Xbox One. And I'm like, I know this can't be for you. It's like, why? Why are you hitting me with your buggy? But she was bound, determined by God, she was going to get that Xbox One, and she did.
She
She
got
did.
it.
At that moment, she was the most dangerous person in that aisle.
That seems to have calmed down a lot.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like even Walmart, they've started opening early or having Black Friday sales so early to the point now, like at my Walmart, people just kind of nonchalantly come in for their $2 Blu-ray. And so
Yeah.
it's, I mean, it's toned down. I mean, one, that's kind of sad because that was literally one of the high points of my year was watching Americans. fight over random things that were not life threatening.
Yeah, like late 90s, early 2000s. That seemed to be like the peak.
Oh yeah, I think actually when I was a kid, 9/11 had just happened, and I mean it was probably 2 or 3 days after the Twin Towers had come down, and for some reason that was when every person, preppers included, decided they had to have diesel and gas. And I remember lines going for neighborhoods, dude. People fighting each other trying to get gallons of gas because in their mind this was literally the end of the world. And it's, oh my God, they were, expecting, because, we're going into the Middle East. So they're expecting gas prices to just go up to, I mean, the way they're talking like $30 a gallon, which is insane by our standards. But I've never seen people so mad in my life. Like, I mean, I'm telling you, that was the day my dad told me, he's like, you are not leaving the house. It's a small town. Everybody knows each other. Everybody's related to each other. And if anything's going to go bad, it would go bad right there. I promise.
That's so funny. I don't remember that happening around here. I remember that time, like I didn't have kids or anything at that time. Um, yeah, I was still, I think I was in my early 20s. So I was like, I didn't, but my uncle had two kids in elementary school and they wouldn't release the kids. And
Yeah.
like the parents were like going to ransack the school to get their kids out. Like it was crazy.
Yeah, I'm
People
telling you, man. Ugh.
people did go crazy during that and it calmed down pretty soon afterwards, but like I live near Canada and my wife and we went to Niagara Falls just to go there and like there was soldiers with M16s like
Yeah.
all along the border with Canada.
This is their moment.
Yeah.
We've been to go back up to Canada ever since what, the Revolutionary War?
Yeah.
When it didn't work the first time,
Yeah.
apparently. No, that's one thing I always joke and tell people. People are like, wow, that really happened down there. I'm like, dude, this is Oklahoma. As far as you're concerned, this is literally the Wild West. I'm telling you. It's like I live in a state where people have been preparing for World War III for their entire life. Like Red Dawn is like religion here. And I am not exaggerating. If you live in Oklahoma, you know that I'm not. So, oh my God. I love this state though, and I'll probably never leave it. But oh my gosh, Oklahoma is the type of place if people bump into each other on the streets, everyone like viciously apologizes because they know that both of them are probably carrying firearms. Like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Are you offended? I've got my hand down here. I'm moving it. Are you offended? Okay, we're just going to back away.
We're
You
cool.
go to an ad on Craigslist, guaranteed someone brought a sniper. Oh man, those ads that make fun of us, they're not lies.
Well, you're Andrew Texas's hat.
Yeah, dude. Oh my God. That was one thing that was the most annoying thing about Britain. You tell somebody you're from Oklahoma and they're like, where is that? And you're like, we're right above Texas. Oh, Texas. Oklahoma is that ugly looking hatchet that no one wants to talk about. Like, I'm just focused on the Lone Star State.
Is your family from Oklahoma? Are you a Sooner or
So, I mean, I was born and raised in Oklahoma. My family's been in Oklahoma probably since like, I mean, 1860, 1870, something like that. But I mean, we originally came over here in the US. I think it was like 1720. And I mean, we're some of the first settlers in the Appalachians, Virginia, Mississippi. We ended up on the wrong side of the Civil War. Really, really, really wrong side. And, but no, we've been here annoying our locals for a very, very long time. The Barksdale family will probably be here continuing to annoy our neighbors for a very long time. Hopefully.
Well, this has been a lot of fun, and I think we definitely have to do this again. We got a couple of things in the works.
Oh yeah.
Um, if people want to, from my podcast, want to learn more about I've definitely talked a lot about your show, but if they want to learn more about your channel, how can they find it?
Oh yeah. So if you want, you can check us out on Facebook. I mean, Twitter. I'm unfortunately, my wife finally talked to me about getting into Instagram. Even though I hate it, I'm on it just because. But I mean, the Study of Antiquity in the Middle Ages. We're all over Twitter, Facebook. I mean, you name it. If you want to get into our Facebook group, we've got a Facebook group for that, and it's just always the Study of Antiquity and the Middle Ages.
And if you want to learn about the history of the papacy, You can go to my website, a2zhistorypage.com. I'm on Twitter and Facebook at A2Z History page. You can search for that. I have not done Instagram yet. I probably have to get my daughter involved on that, get her to run my Instagram because
I
that's just beyond me.
man, it's just nothing but pictures. And I think that's my thing. I've just never really got into that. But I mean, I'm trying to slowly force myself to get into it just because, I mean, apparently it's a huge thing and a lot of YouTubers really take advantage of it. So I'm going to just have to force myself to evolve.
My first step is YouTube. Once I get a little more comfortable on this, then Instagram might be the next horizon.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree completely. Yeah, like I was telling all of our subscribers out there, whether you listen to the History of the Papacy podcast or you hopefully you listen to him, you should. He's on my channel. So that means if you're not listening to him, you're not watching my videos. Shame on you. But you can check him out. Always check the video description below. I always include links to all the places you can find people like Steve and his podcast, places where you can go to support him, give him ratings, so on and so forth. And if you saw that we were jittery, don't judge us by this video. I
Yeah,
don't
this was
hardly
the
do
first
this.
time.
He doesn't hardly do this. And we are going to continue to do it, though, and we'll slowly get better.
Yeah,
So,
definitely hit the bell, subscribe. Whatever your favorite podcatcher is, subscribe there to the History of the Papacy and Beyond the Big Screen. We haven't done that too much. There's a great movie that's just a little bit beyond your the it's more of the early modern ages, but it's called The Last Valley, and it was starring Michael Caine was in it.
and James, is it based off of a book?
I think it is based off a book. I didn't actually read the book, but I want to read the book. And it's all about a mercenary company that's like half Calvinist with Catholics in it and Lutherans. They're all mixed in together and they all hate each other. And then they go into this valley, like Hidden Valley, that hadn't, not Hidden Valley Ranch, Hidden Valley that's hasn't really been touched by the 30 Years' War. And they basically take over the valley. They have this big fight with this like radical Catholic priest who's fighting with the Calvinists. It's really cool because it does give you, of a movie that was made like in the 70s, you never think that they'd really get into the nitty gritty of the 30 Years' War. And then, of course, it has Michael Caine in it.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to have to watch it now.
Yeah, it's free on YouTube. I probably shouldn't say that, but it is free on there. Michael Caine has a romance with, it's not Sophia Loren, but it looks like her.
Yeah, I'm adding this to my to watch list now. There's no way I can't watch this.
Yeah, it's a really good movie. And who's the other guy in it?
It's a Sharif, isn't it?
Yeah, Omar Sharif's in it. And like in the like kind of 70s movie style, he like walks off into the valley and like has talks with destiny, and it's a really good movie.
It's a little bit past my era as well, but it's along the same timeline as the English Civil War. That's a very provocative title, but have you watched the Devil's Whore?
No, I haven't seen
That
that.
is a very good one. It's got Michael Fassbender in it. I forget this guy's name, but did you ever watch the movie 300?
Yeah.
So he's the bad Spartan, the bad guy that's in the Senate that she stabs to death.
Oh yeah, that guy.
So he's in it as Cromwell. And it's a mini series. I think it's like 5 episodes, but it is absolutely phenomenal. And I mean, it's bad to the bone. If you haven't seen it, you need to. It's really good.
I'll have to see another movie that has been highly recommended, and maybe we could talk about it because it does fit well into the channel time, is In the Name of the Rose with Sean Connery and Christian Slater.
Yes.
That one's supposed to be like off the wall good.
It is awesome. You've got the Inquisition in it. I mean, it's like in the very heart of the Inquisition period. And Sean Connery and his like deductive reasoning and his almost like detective style skills that kind of plays, it's a pro for him, but in the storyline, it basically is a con because that's when the Inquisition starts looking at him and they're like, hey, what's up with you? If you hear my dogs, I apologize. But it's really good. They just recently remade that into a TV show, and I've been dying to watch it. I saw half of the first episode, and it looks awesome. But it was, oh man, it starts off with a bang. I can't wait. I need to just, since I've got a little girl now, it's kind of iffy when I can watch over the top violence shows and when I can't. So,
Oh, that was like me with the Borgias.
yeah.
Um, I watched it when my son was born, and it must have been like the winter of 2015. He would get up at like 4 in the morning, and I had to be to work at like 8, so there was no point in going to bed. So I'd watch like four Borgias at a time.
Oh yeah. So okay. So when it comes to the Borgias, which series is it? Because I think there's the one with he plays the voice of Scar. Oh my God,
Oh
Jeremy
yeah,
Irons.
Jeremy. That one
And
for me, I tried to watch that, and it was like NyQuil. Like it was out by like 15 minutes in, I'd be completely asleep. Like that was my insomnia cure.
See, I loved it primarily because I love that guy, and I love the dude they got to play his son. I really
Oh
imagine
yeah,
that
he was
guy
good.
that would be a Cesare Borgia, right? But the other one too, the Netflix series exclusive, that one was really, really fun. And the little cliffhanger it ends with, I'm not going to give it away in case anybody hasn't seen it, but
I
it was really good.
I like that one. It was trashy, which I
Oh yeah,
kind of like that. And like John Doman, like that's the last person you'd ever think they would cast
yeah.
as a medieval pope, like talking and like his kind of semi Philadelphia accent. Like
Oh yeah.
that was over the top. Like that made it.
No,
You
that's
know,
true. Because I
everybody
mean,
else is
really, I've only seen that guy in cop movies. Like nine
yeah.
times out of ten, he is a cop. And so when I saw he was the Pope, I was like, no way.
Whoever casted him was either a genius or like never is gonna work again.
I'd go with a 50-50 shot. It could be either or. But that was very smart. And I did not expect them to portray him dying like that. Like he becomes so bloated in that final episode involving his death. Ugh.
But that's what happened.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what's
that's what's
insane.
crazy.
The other show had gotten canceled, so we never got to see the bloated, rotting Jeremy Irons, unfortunately.
I love it too. Like, I thought that show so much more than a lot of shows. Like, it mixed in the historical fiction elements, like that cliffhanger you added in there, and
Yes.
like Cesare Borgia. There's not a lot of what happened in him in like big chunks of his career, and I thought that they fit in like the fictional parts to fit all that story. Like it was so smooth in there, and it's I thought like it too, like it didn't leave it that you were thinking like a lot of the stuff that was fiction was history. Like if you went and read Wikipedia, you found out pretty quickly what was fiction and what was not fiction. But it's just like something to enjoy as entertainment. Like that was really cool.
Oh no, I agree completely. And I need to send you the link, but there's the original. I think it's by BBC. It's all on YouTube now. I think they're in like 20-minute episodes, but it's the original Borges. And that's,
Oh,
yeah, it's super bad and it's super cheesy, but I will send it to you. I will.
it's another one that it's a little trashy and it's cheesy, but the Medici, I think it was called the
Oh,
Medici
dude,
with
yeah.
the guy from Game
Yes.
of Thrones.
Yeah, it's the he's in that and of course there is the whole Medici series and they did the weird random like prequel series, the Medici Masters of Florence, but it's I forget who it is, but Sean Bean plays the bad guy in it.
Yeah,
And he
Dustin
looks like a
Hoffman
heroin
is in
addict
it.
throughout the entire series. Did you notice that? That dude is sweating 24/7.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Oh yeah, his hair is like all super greasy. He looks like he did when he went crazy in Lord of the Rings. Like seriously, some things did not change, but that's a fun, very fun show. But now, do you watch? It's not really trashy. It's probably over the top violent, but even then, it's really not that bad. Have you watched The Last Kingdom yet?
Yeah, not all of it. I'm not completely caught up on it, but I've watched all of the first season and about half of the second season.
I'm already getting pretty mad because it's getting close to the point in history where they're going to kill my boy, and that's just going to really make me angry when it happens. And that's the thing. If they do it, how he died in history. Are you familiar with that at all?
I've read all the books, but I I'm trying to think of how like Uhtred dies.
Yes, because I haven't read the books yet. I need to read Cornwell, especially because I've always wanted to dabble in historical fiction. I feel like Cornwell is someone that I would really enjoy. I know I sold him like crazy when I worked at the bookstore, so he has to be decent.
The next one's coming out soon. I already pre-ordered it. I think it's coming out in like the beginning of November. I'm addicted to them. Like no matter what I'm reading, no matter what I'm doing, when the new Saxon stories comes
Oh,
out, it's all done. Like and catch me like 3 days later when it's all done.
I need to read more fiction. I think that's one of my things. I read so much nonfiction. I mean, man, I've been doing that for years. I feel like I haven't sat down and just read a fictional book in, I mean, years. I need to rectify that. But speaking of Sean Bean and Cornwell, have you watched the series that came out? I think it was the early '90s called Sharp.
Oh yeah.
Dude,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a show that I demand they need to remake. And Sean Bean is still able to play his character. I'm
Oh yeah,
just,
he could be sharp for
oh, well,
sure.
he should be sharp. He can look like a sweating heroin addict in that one as well.
There's another movie. It's a foreign movie. I think it was made in Poland about Pope Joan. I did a couple of episodes about it, but I
Oh,
think his brother from the he played Baromir. Was that,
yeah, yeah,
and his
Faramir,
brother
Faramir. Yeah,
Faramir, the guy with who kind of looks
yeah,
like him but had the red hair.
yeah, that's true.
He played like the love interest in this Pope Joan movie, and it just looked like the Pope Joan movie was a pretty low budget affair. It looked like he had just used his clothes from whatever was left
Oh,
over from the Lord of the Rings.
I'm gonna have to watch this now. I don't know how I haven't seen this. He's also.
Oh,
Did you ever watch Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman?
I think I saw it a while ago though.
Did you know Faramir is that little dorky monk that follows him around all over the place?
Oh, is it? I
Yeah,
gotta
no,
watch
it
that one
doesn't
again.
even look like him, dude. It's creepy. Ugh. But no, yeah, I thought that was funny. Okay, so I'm pretty sure what we need to do the next time we do this, and we could just title it the must-watch history movies. Or, I mean, it could literally be just us for an hour just talking about history films. I mean, like we're doing right now. I think that
Yeah.
was really, really good to actually sit down and have a conversation with you.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I'll talk to you later.